Forestry housed within the Department of Agriculture before concluding with some additional discussion about the regional conservation strategy that we started to take up in the last couple of meetings that we held in 2020. So before getting into the big substance of the meeting, I want to give new faces an opportunity to introduce themselves to the group, and also will ask Jessica Hill, who is a new hire at GNRC, into the role of Director of Regional and Community Planning at GNRC, to briefly introduce herself. She is overseeing the planning work at GNRC. She's been on staff for, I think, the entirety of a week and a half, so she's fully expert in everything. And Jessica, if you don't mind, just giving us a brief introduction.
Hi, yes, thank you, Ben. I appreciate it, and I look forward to participating in future meetings with this roundtable. I am coming from Charlotte, North Carolina. I was with the Central Lina Regional Council there that served the 9 counties around the Charlotte area. I have vast experience in land use and transportation planning, as well as public engagement. And I started my career at Central Lina in the sustainability field. So I really look forward to getting back into that with this group. So thank you, Ben, for allowing me time to introduce myself.
You bet. Welcome again, but welcome more specifically to the Regional Environmental Roundtable. Are there any other new faces that are joining us this morning that would like to take the opportunity to introduce yourselves to the group?
I'll introduce myself real quick. My name is Chris DeVore. I'm with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I work closely with Emily Grandstaff, and we're part of the Southeast Blueprint User Support Team. So nice to meet you all.
Great. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks.
I'm just scanning the list of participants in teams here to see if there are any other new faces. Anyone else like to introduce themselves? In the meantime, I'll just share with everyone that some of you, I imagine, certainly are aware that the roundtable's representative from the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, Greg Wathen, entered retirement late in 2020. He was unable to join us in December of this past year for our meeting in December. I recently reconnected with him, and I don't know if he thought he might sneak away quietly, but we're going to do our best to pull him back into the roundtable as a bit of an emeritus representative and participant in the roundtable. And I've also asked Greg, and we've had some discussion already, but I've asked Greg to help identify an appropriate representative from TWRA, or representatives perhaps from TWRA, to pick up the torch and run with it as it relates to representation here. Greg had a last-minute conflict arise this morning, but otherwise I believe he intends to join us going forward. So you'll see his face again at future roundtable meetings. Anyone else? If not, we will move into the next segment of the agenda, which is a brief recap of our December 2020 meeting and the year in review. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but just to help refresh people's memories as we've come off the holiday season. It seems like months ago that we last met, I'd have to admit myself, but what we've been able to do in the December meeting was introduce and implement the concept that we discussed in the last quarter of 2020, being the member spotlights. Again, thanks to Emily Parrish from the Land Trust for Tennessee, and also to Robbie Hayes, a board member from the Cumberland Region Tomorrow, for kicking us off with that. As I mentioned, the Division of Forestry staff are going to build into their presentation a bit of an overview that will take on today's member spotlight segment. Keep in mind that the presentations that we shared in the meeting in December are posted on the Roundtable's website at GNRC's webpage, and along with all of our other meeting materials and information. And then the other thing I'd just point out again, especially for those folks who might be newer to the group or new today to the group, is that we started to pivot more significantly in our December discussion from what has been our focus over the course of a majority of 2020 being the engagement around the update to the long-range transportation plan, which again, Sean will give an update on in just a moment, towards the development of a regional conservation strategy. And we'll come back to that at the end of the meeting today, and we'll give everyone an opportunity to provide additional feedback into how we're approaching that work in 2020. And certainly we will be bringing more information about that, and that will continue to be a significant focus of what we'd like to have be a significant focus of the Roundtable as we continue through 2021. And so we'll have a chance to get into a little more discussion about the strategy and build off of what we covered in the December 2020 meeting. I'd also like to point out, and we shared this by email as an attachment this morning as well, we took a stab at GNRC at developing a 2020 year in review for the Roundtable. It's available as a PDF, and I'd imagine we will be posting that on our Roundtable's website as well before too long. It was really an effort to help recognize and reinforce the shared vision that we developed early in 2020 for the Roundtable's work going forward. We really wanted to recognize and highlight the collaborative spirit and the way in which we engaged together in the work in 2020, and to really recognize the various contributions that each of you offered to GNRC, especially as it related to the RTP update and the ways in which we engaged in environmental analyses over the course of 2020, which is continuing into 2021. But in other ways as well, helping to collaborate on the setup of the Roundtable itself, and to reaffirm your commitment as we move into 2021 to keep this group coming together and working together in that collaborative spirit. And certainly wanted to kind of lead the way forward with the end of the year summary by lifting up the focus on the development of a regional conservation strategy. We're hopefully in one page only, we've done a good job of capturing the core messages and elements of our work, both in 2020 and as we turn the page. And certainly hope that you'll see that as a helpful document that celebrates the work that we've done together. With that, I will turn it over to Sean Falzer from GNRC, our Transportation Planning Manager, to give an update and overview of where we stand with the update to the 2045 Regional Transportation Plan. Sean?
Thanks, Ben. Good morning, everyone. Just want to give you a quick update on the Regional Transportation Plan. You've been involved with us throughout the past year through your 2020 meetings, and just want to give you kind of a recap of the latest. We have, if you advance to the next slide, Ben, we had the state and federal compliance review. If you remember, we submitted a draft document to TDOT, FHWA, and FTA in the late fall, and they were able to review those documents and provide us with additional questions and comments to address. And so we're in the process right now of responding to some of those comments that were identified. And the next step of the process is to actually have our formal public review and comment period, which is scheduled to occur over the next month. And what we're thinking for that, we'll definitely notify you of once that's released and the opportunities to comment. But we're thinking of potentially holding 2 virtual meetings. The platform is not solidified yet, but a way for us to communicate some of the updates on the regional transportation plan, and then for folks that have comments to relay a way that we can obtain that feedback from stakeholders as well as members of the general public. targeting early February for those meetings, but Ben will be definitely have that information to relay via email once that's solidified. And that's really to stay on schedule for our adoption by the Transportation Policy Board at our February 17th meeting, which would have our formal public hearing and adoption by the board. And we currently have, you'll see the link, we have the draft chapters and appendices available for your review at that link. And then one thing I wanted to highlight is we have a project application on our website, which Ben will pull up here in a second, that has the projects that were submitted for funding through the Regional Transportation Plan, captures not only the projects that are funded as well as those that have not been identified for funding within the plan. And then one thing that we've added in response to the comments received from state and federal partners is some additional detail. We added a tab, that fourth tab on environmental, and that is in order to showcase the different environmental layers that we looked at and considered through the evaluation process that Ben was a part of. And that allows you to compare some of the different environmental layers to the project locations. And so the first tab kind of aggregated a lot of that environmental information that we considered, but this tab that the data team has added to this application allows you to pull specific layers such as protected lands through that. Yeah, that's the right button, Ben. So on that layers tab, you have various options of what you can select and deselect. So great tool. And I think that being able to kind of zoom in and out and select specific projects provides much finer level of detail to consider and view the projects by. So with that, encourage you to check out those resources and feel free to submit formal comments as part of the process.
Sean, I assume my informal tour of the page was coming through all right graphically?
Yeah, there's the last layer that you selected, I think, was a little bit slow to load. Just for folks that go on that page, give the environmental layers a little bit more time than some of the others because they are pretty massive files.
I would just add to that that type of interface is very similar to the GIS-based tool that was used by me primarily, and then others for different issue areas as we reviewed the project by project evaluation that we've talked to you all about in 2020. So we're working to summarize and simplify some of those data layers and the way in which it was engaged. Those data layers were engaged through the RTP process for a more general public consumption, but know that much of the underlying detail that was used in 2020 is now being made available in hopefully a user-friendly format. I'd encourage you all to navigate to that site when you have a chance, just to play around with it a little bit, but hopefully it will become useful to you and in your work going forward as well. With that, other questions or comments on any of the information that Sean has presented? All right. Unless there are any last second questions or comments, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the combination of the member spotlight and overview of the recently updated state forest action plan. And with that, I will turn it over, I believe, to Heather Slayton. Is that correct?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I appreciate that. I'm going to try to take control of the screen for me there.
All right.
Get myself set up. All right. Can you see my screen okay, Ben?
Yep, I can see it. Looks
All right.
great.
Turn my camera on. And we're good to go. Oh, so good morning, everybody. My name is Heather Slayton, as Assistant State Forester for the Division of Forestry. Ben's asked us to come to you guys today to talk a little bit about the Department of Ag and also about our recently finished Forest Action Plan. So I'm going to take the first part of the presentation talking about the Department of Ag and then a little bit of the Forest Action Plan presentation, and then I'm going to turn it over to Rachel Green, who's going to have the bulk of the Forest Action Plan presentation. So just digging into the Department of Ag real quick. Let me see if I can make sure I can advance my screen. So fun fact, the Department of Ag was the first agency created in the state government. So 1854 is when we were created, and we just now retired some of those first employees. That's kind of a jab, but we do have a lot of long-term employees at the Department of Ag. Some folks have worked with us for 50, 60 years. So we are a big family out there. We also brag that ag and forestry are the #1 industries in Tennessee. Our economic impact is upwards of $81 billion. So we do that with a pretty lean staff. But again, we work holistically together and are very passionate about what we do. So just real quick, can't be Department of Ag presentation without a mission statement. And I might find that there's some things I'll talk about today that are surprising to you, but obviously our mission is to provide options for responsible use of ag and forestry resources and develop those economic opportunities associated with those resources, and then safeguard food and fiber and ensuring an equity in the marketplace. I feel like maybe the last two elements there might be a little surprising, at least they were to me when I first started with the Department of Ag. Our commissioner is Dr. Charlie Hatcher. He is kind of homegrown within our ranks. He was our state veterinarian. His picture is that top left there. He also, you guys might be familiar with his operation, the Hatcher Dairy Farms, and down there in Williamson County. So we're very happy to have him on board. The 5 major divisions within the Department of Ag. Obviously, we have an administration of grants division, forestry, and forestry is the largest part of the Department of Ag. We've got a consumer and industry services, animal health, which I just mentioned was where Dr. Hatcher came from, veterinarian from the Department for Animal Health. And then we have a business development unit to help support those $81 billion of economy that's associated with ag and forestry. So this presentation, I'm just going to kind of give you guys introduction into each one of those divisions. But the administration and grants, obviously you guys know we've got HR, our budget, our legal, public affairs, folks that help operate the actual business of the Department of Ag, commodity distribution, and some folks don't know, but we do have our own police force, so to speak. We call them the Agricultural Crime Unit, and they focus on anywhere from mysterious or thefts of cattle, mysterious deaths of livestock, to what's depicted here in the picture is arson, wildfire arson, to be specific. So they're statewide. They've got a good presence statewide. We have land and water stewardship, and then we have an agricultural museum. So we are located at the Ellington Ag Center down there, kind of South Nashville and Antioch. So I absolutely encourage everybody to come up there. We are a working farm, one of the last remaining Department of Ags that's situated on a working farm, about 200 acres out there, where we have, with Metro Mounted Patrol has their horse brigade that's out there. So we have, associated, hay fields and barns and whatnot for the mounted patrol. But we also have our own gardens out there. We the grounds are just spectacular. There's a lot of trails that are all around Ellington. So I absolutely encourage you guys to, if you haven't paid a visit to our campus, please do so. So let's dig into forestry a little bit. Our mission is to protect, conserve, and enhance Tennessee's forest resources. And there's a considerable amount of sentence after that, but that's the bread and butter of our mission. I mentioned we are 106 years old. The Division of Forestry is 106 years old. So we were originally started to address some of the erosion issues out in West Tennessee, and obviously to be there for wildfires, and then we've grown considerably since then. We have a presence in all 95 counties. We've got 470 folks that work for us, and of those, about 150 are seasonal firefighters. So they come and go, but we do have a pretty robust staff. And I like to say that we're kind of a cradle to grave service provider. The picture you see in the background is out of our nursery. We grow anywhere from 7 to 15 million trees every year. So those are all oak species that you see right there. That's down there in Polk County, situated right on the Hiwassee River. So again, open to any visits. Anybody wants to come down there. We just love having visitors, COVID safe visitors, obviously. But we've got about 500 acres down there that we farm a portion of. And so we grow tree seedlings for conservation efforts across the state. All of our seedlings, they end up pretty much in every single county. And then we have a staff of foresters that help landowners grow these seedlings. And then obviously we have a staff of firefighters that help protect these seedlings. And we have a business development arm that helps to harvest, these trees as they're growing to maturity. And then finally, we kind of repeat the cycle. So the Division of Forestry does everything, all things forestry from cradle to grave. We do this by organizing ourselves into business units, so to speak. So I mentioned we have, we're wildland firefighters is, our main mission. And our fire season is October to May. So outside of that, we do all kinds of other good fun stuff. We have a forest data analysis unit. Rachel Green, who's going to be the next presenter, leads that unit. And that's kind of the glue that holds us all together. We got 168,000 acres that we own, and we manage for multi-resources or multi-uses, timber management being a predominant use. We do cut timber and make money, make revenue off of our state forest, and there's about 15 of those. We have a forest health and sustainability unit that kind of encapsulates, obviously, forest health, but like our rural forestry, our urban forestry, water quality, the landowner assistance services that we have. So that's all nested within that forest health and sustainability unit. We have a big story to tell. So we have a unit that's designated and designed to be our outreach and communications unit. And then finally, I mentioned earlier, we have a reforestation unit, which manages that beautiful nursery down there in the Hiwassee. And then going on to different divisions within the Department of Ag, we've got, food and dairy, plant health, weights and measures. You guys may be aware that we are the agency that checks to make sure a gallon of gasoline is a gallon of gasoline, and you guys are paying for exact gallon of gasoline. So you'll see our sticker on gas pumps. We do the same thing, and the picture in the middle is we're calibrating scales of all sorts. All scales across the state of Tennessee are calibrated by us, whether that's larger scales to measure or to weigh log trucks, or the scales you see in Kroger to measure produce. So we make sure that there's equity in the marketplace that way. And then we do a lot of, we do the hemp program. So we make sure that what the crops that we're growing are safe and they're not carrying diseases. So we go to a lot of the Lowe's or the Home Depots and do inspections there at their nursery stock. So the Department of Ag is kind of, we're everywhere. And then a lot of folks don't know half the stuff that we do, but we make sure that there's food safety and equity in the marketplace. Cattle is one of our top commodities in Tennessee. So we have a huge animal health team, both up there at Ellington and across the state. And this is anywhere from poultry to, cows, horses, equine, that sort of thing. So we have a necropsy lab up there at Ellington. And so if you have any mysterious farm deaths that you want to figure out what's going on before it gets into your herd, that's what we do. That's where our necropsy lab kind of specializes in. And of course, we're the state veterinarian is responsible for any kind of domestic or foreign disease management in livestock health. And finally, we have a business development section. We have to have a whole other section that supports the #1 industries in Tennessee, it's ag and forestry. And we do that through the Pick Tennessee products. I'm pretty sure you guys are all familiar with that program. There are TAP, which is our Tennessee Agriculture Enhancement Program. We get some money from some tobacco settlements, and we're able to grant that money out to different entities, both farm and forestry entities, to help grow their operations there. And then we have some other grant programs that we use for business development. Agriculture enhancement programs, one of them, where we try to find these industries that might need a little bit of help growing or entering into a certain marketplace. One specific example is we have a sluggish meat processing industry. I don't know if you folks on the call here have ever, if you're from the farm and have ever needed to have a hog or a cow slaughtered, but there is a tremendous line that you have to get into because there are not a lot of meat processors in Tennessee. And so we try to partner with vocational schools to start developing that technology, developing that workforce, so we can expand meat processing. And consequently, that came to a real reality during COVID. We have a lot of folks that were kind of interested in laying low, and obviously there was a shortage in some supply chains and from the grocery store, so folks kind of turned to farmers and more grassroots type food acquisitions. And so we had a lot of our existing meat processors come to us looking for help to expand. So that's the kind of stuff that we get into. I encourage everybody to try to explore. We have a lot of dashboards out there to explore what we do, how we do it, and to the level that we conduct business. So we've got some interactive data pages out there that's really helpful in telling our story. We're scientists at best, so we like to count widgets and like to talk about weird sciencey things. So these dashboards help us tell that story a little bit better. And then finally, here's just a general contact page. I know that there's nobody scrambling to write these numbers down, but just wanted to point out that we are on all the major social media platforms, and there's a fun following out there. So I encourage everybody to like us on Facebook and try to find us on some of these social media platforms, because, like I said, we are this weird kept secret in Tennessee, but we get into a lot of really cool stuff, and we want everybody to be a part of our family there. So Ben, that's the Department of Ag's presentation, and I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Rachel, and then she's going to pull up the Forest Action Plan, unless anybody had some questions for me, or is that how you want to handle that, Ben?
Yeah, thanks, Heather. That was a really helpful overview. Just a quick note, if you're amenable, we'll go ahead and share those slides as a PDF with the roundtable as a follow-up, so people can have that those contact numbers and the web links easy at their fingertips. And then, yeah, if before we pivot to an overview of the Forest Action Plan, if there are any questions about what Heather has shared so far, or any aspects of the Tennessee's Department of Ag or Division of Forestry that people want to jump into right now, we certainly can carve out a couple minutes now. And if not, then we can move right into the next segment of the discussion.
Okay, cool. All right, so this next section of the presentation is going to be specifically towards the Division of Forestry, and Ben asked us to go through our Forest Action Plan and introduce that to you and kind of help you understand what the priorities for the Division of Forestry is going to be, for the next 10 years. So again, I'm going to present just a couple of slides of this, and then I'm going to turn it over to Rachel, so you have a little bit of a diversity of speakers there. But our Forest Action Plan, it's a 10-year plan, and you'll see that there are 2 logos on this. We did co-author it with the Nature Conservancy. So go ahead, Rachel. Do you want to advance the slide, Rachel? There you go. Thank you. And I understand that the Forest Action Plan might be a new concept or new publication to some folks on the call, but this is our second iteration of it. Our first iteration came out in 2010, and that too was a 10-year action plan. But we are mandated to do this by the 2008 Farm Bill. And it's a requisite for us to be able to receive their federal funding, but also obviously folks on the call understand the value of planning. So it is a good tool and good exercise to go through to get all of our conservation organizations kind of going in the same direction. So this is a picture of the first one, and then if you want to advance the slide, Rachel. This is the second one. So I mentioned this is we partner with the Nature Conservancy to write this 2020-2030 Forest Action Plan, and that was a very intentional decision on our part. And shout out to Trish Johnson for partnering with me to do that. It was a 18-month, nearly 2-year project. And one that I know that she didn't necessarily have on her priority list before I approached her. And maybe I didn't explain it to her enough that she wouldn't have said no. But I know that the Nature Conservancy was very proud and very supportive and very excited to partner with us on this. And they brought to the table a tremendous wealth of knowledge and information and experience and perspective that really helped make this a very, very well-rounded plan. So I'm pretty excited to dig into it. And I believe, Rachel, this is where you take over. Is that correct? Oh, one more slide. Okay. So we're going to organize this presentation kind of the way that the action plan is organized. We are not going to really obviously get into the nitty gritties of the action plan because it's 140 pages and Ben would kill us and everybody would be asleep. But so we're going to just give you a brief overview of the action plan and then provide you with a QR link of where to go find it. It's up on our website, and maybe some of you have already read it because we did put it out for public comment. But we start off with a hang on, there you go. We start off with a forest resource assessment, and Rachel, obviously, being our forest data analysis unit leader, held the lion's share of that. So we look at our 14 million acres of forest in Tennessee. Over half of the state is forested, so that was a heavy lift on her part. So we look at how the forest is at this snapshot, and then we develop these forest objectives of what we want to do with that forest and how we want to manage it and protect it for the next 10 years. And then we develop these priority areas using several different data layers, of which I'm sure you are familiar, and to really focus our efforts and move the needle or measure how to move the needle in those areas. And then finally, we have a strategy matrix that is well, I can show it to you later, but it helps us organize who's going to do what and which resources the state forester needs to implement the plan. Okay. And then as we were going through this thought process, I mean, you can imagine a whole action plan for a state is overwhelming. So, there were many different priorities and areas that we wanted to focus on, but we had to really make it succinct and measurable. But we wanted to make sure everybody understood that these 3 foundational elements may or may not be called out specifically in each of our strategies or objectives or action steps, but they are underlying currents for the entire action plan. And we have to all agree that diverse, sustainable, and competitive markets, and in this case, it's forest products markets, drive everything. The landowners and our forest partners and our conservation partners have to have markets to drive decisions and to give the owners of those forests options by which they can manage their forest. So that's a huge underlying current for us. and obviously coupled with the fact that ag and forestry are the #1 industries in Tennessee, that we wouldn't be there obviously without markets. Outreach and education, massive underlying current for sure. I mean, should go with everything, right? And then finally, partnerships, groups like this group here. I mean, we all have to kind of come together, understand where our priorities start, other priorities end, but still looking at managing for the greater good on that same piece of ground is super important. So partnerships, that we're not going to be able to achieve any of this without very strong, effective partnerships. Okay, Rachel, your turn.
All right, so I'm Rachel Green, Forest Data Analysis Unit Leader. As Heather has mentioned, my internet is a little bit sluggish, so I'll leave my camera off until I'm finished presenting. But let's start with the first section of the Forest Action Plan, and that is the Forest Resource Condition Assessment. As Heather mentioned, the extent of forest land in Tennessee is about 14 million acres, or 53% of Tennessee's total land area, and that stayed about constant since the 1960s. There have been little fluctuations, but more or less 50 to 53% of Tennessee has been forested for several decades now. Our largest forested blocks occur in the far eastern counties, where the Cherokee National Forest and the park are located. We also have a lot of dense forests on the Cumberland Plateau and on the western Highland Rim to the west of Nashville. The westernmost counties in Tennessee have the least forested land historically, but there has been a slight increase in forest out there in the last 10 years. But there's also increasing development going on around Memphis that could erode some of those forest gains as urbanization and that area continues to grow. We have about 83% of forests in private ownership. And by private ownership, I mean, for the most part, these are families and individuals who own forest land. About 17% of forests are publicly owned or quote unquote protected. 5% of that is the Cherokee National Forest. We do have a aging demographic of our family forest landowners. The majority are at least 55 years of age and have held their parcels or their forests for at least 25 years. So the objectives and the concerns of those landowners are going to be very different compared to landowners that have very large tracts and whose primary objective may be cutting timber or maybe an economic objective. So for some landowners, they're more concerned about taxes, inheritance, and their legacy. For some landowners, particularly ones with some smaller tracts or that live on their forest land, their primary, objectives and concerns are around wildlife viewing or perhaps, hunting or aesthetics. So we have to think about how demographics can shape objectives and concerns of landowners across the state and sort of build that into our landowner assistance capacity, so our area foresters can kind of speak to the specific objectives and concerns of these, diverse landowners that we have in Tennessee. Oak hickory is the dominant forest type in the state. And over the last, I'd say, 20 to 30 years, there has been a shift to larger tree sizes and some older aged stands. So right now we have, if you think about a distribution curve of, stand ages, it really peaks around, 60 to 70 years old. Concurrently, we've also seen a shift toward lower quality hardwood trees across much of the state. And this is where, that need for diverse, competitive, sustainable markets is really highlighted. We need a market to use some of that low-grade wood to move it off the landscape and provide a way to get some regeneration going on and to grow, higher quality hardwood trees for the future. Across the state, we do have a net growth of forests, meaning that the growth occurring in trees each year exceeds that which is harvested or dies of natural causes or because of a tornado or a freeze, etc. So overall, we're growing forests. In the Forest Action Plan, we have a few wood availability case studies where we look at these forest resource conditions on more localized scales of what could be about a 100-mile diameter procurement area for a mill. And we look at things like the effects of ownership and demographic patterns, road access, trends in forest cover and forest type. We do estimations of wood volume and sustainability of harvests. And what we found is that in all those case studies, they really just echo what the trends that we're seeing statewide. That oak hickory is the dominant forest type. We have these shifts to larger trees and older stands, and we also have shifts toward some lower quality wood being grown. In the forest objectives section, we identified 4 primary objectives, these being enhancing forest health and resilience, expanding market diversification. The third is maintaining and improving connected landscapes. And the fourth, strengthening wildfire resilient communities. And as Heather said, partnerships are going to drive forward all of these objectives. We can't really talk about maintaining and improving connected landscapes without talking about our natural resource agencies that we partner with. And we can't really talk about wildfire resilient communities without having partnerships with those communities at risk of wildfire. So we talk to mayors, we look at programs like FireWise, or we have a Learn, Plan, Act website coming out to address some of these things that landowners can do to be proactive in managing their forests and decreasing risk from either forest health issues or from risk of wildfire. So there was a question in the chat box that I'll go ahead and address. Someone asked, how is forestland defined? And that can be a really sciencey, long explanation, but forestland is basically that canopy cover is at least 10%. So it's just a measure of how many trees are in a certain area to define it as a forest. Okay.
Rachel, this is Ben. Can I just quickly jump in?
Sure.
Can you just say a little bit more about how you arrive at that value?
Sure. So
the data sources, I assume it's land cover classification, but maybe not, and maybe it gets too sciencey. So measure your response as you wish.
Okay, that's fine. We have adopted the U.S. Forest Service's definitions. The Forest Service has what's called a forest inventory and analysis program, where they have all of these plots where they go measure things about the forests across Tennessee. And so we've adopted their definition for forest land because we also use their data in other areas. So. All right, so within each of our forest objectives, we've broken it up into sections. So we're going to describe what is the current state and then how is it threatened. So for instance, in the forest health section, we can describe the relative condition of forests, particularly as it relates to insects and disease damage, invasive plants, or any other biological agents, or other factors like drought, heat, freeze damage, etc., that could impact the forest. Or another example is looking at the expanding market diversification objective. So there, the current state might be a description of our current markets and the trends that we're seeing in those markets. And when we describe what the threats are, that could be, a decline in the amount of wood in grade 1. That's the highest grade. Or we could talk about, the need for, more export markets, or, developing things internally in Tennessee to keep wood manufacturing here, for instance. So continuing through each of these forest objectives sections, we also have a section on goals, strategies, and actions. There are some overall goals for each objective, and nested within the goal, you have this hierarchy of a strategy and some specific actions that can speak to that strategy. We also highlight some success stories of how we have either capitalized on an opportunity already, or we are working with a partner to start working on an action that's described in the Forest Action Plan. The next big section of the Forest Action Plan has our priority areas. This is a spatial definition of where we want to prioritize work in the areas of forest health, markets, and wildfire resilience, etc. So we use 3 layers primarily to define these priority areas. The first is a U.S. Forest Service layer called Forest Faucets. This was a big project to identify which forests are contributing the most to clean drinking water for large populations. So it's a combination of looking at forest cover as well as the water intake facility locations and how many people, how large the population is that's being served by that intake location. The second layer we used is a forest carbon stock estimate, which tells us, how much carbon is being stored, not just in the tree, but also below ground in the roots, how much carbon is stored in, fallen limbs or other, dead woody debris on the forest floor. It could be how much carbon is being stored in the soil and locked in place because of the forest being there, etc. And the third layer we use is the Nature Conservancy's connected and resilient landscapes. So connected, we mean physically connected. And by resilient, we mean resilient to some change that could take place on the landscape. And the one that comes to mind most often would be climate change resilience. This TNC connected and resilient landscapes layer captures areas that have what are called microclimates or microgeographies. So they have, some really niche characteristics or, a wide range of climatic variables or vegetation or geological characteristics that could provide habitat or other conditions conducive to adaptation to some large-scale event or long-term trend in the landscape. And so finally, we get back to the last section of the Forest Action Plan, which is the strategy matrix and the resources needed to address these statewide strategies. So on the left-hand side, you have the objective, you have what national priority from the U.S. Forest Service is addressed by that objective, you have goal, and then the strategies are outlined. And then on the right-hand sort of side of the table, you have these, X's of what's needed. So for strategy number 4, for instance, market development is checked off as being a resource that we need. Partnerships with government and non-government organizations is another one. Financial assistance to private landowners and increased data and analytical capacity. Those are the 4 resources that we need to be successful in strategy number 4. So if you have any questions, this is our contact information. Heather Slayton, who you heard speak earlier, to the Department of Ag. And then you have myself and Trish Johnson. And a placeholder graphic that I'm not sure what that was supposed to be.
It doesn't look like the most up-to-date presentation made it to Ben's inbox just yet.
Well, thank you too. That was really helpful, and lots of information there. I know that, as you both indicated, there's lots more detail and information in the plan itself. A couple of quick things before opening it up to any questions or comments from the rest of the roundtable. On Monday of this week, in the email I sent out to the group with the agenda for today, I did include the link to the Forest Action Plan website where people can navigate to access the print quality or web-based versions of the document. And we'll make sure that we send that link around to folks, again, along with the rest of today's meeting materials. Secondly, I know that you both know we had conversations earlier in 2020 about the information being assembled as part of the Forest Action Plan update and the timing of when it might be available, as that related to the timing of our regional transportation plan update, so that we could figure out whether or not or how we could bring any of that information into the environmental analysis that we were performing as part of the RTP update. I think, thankfully, we were able to, this is always a reinforcement in my mind that we're all, looking at the same issues, the same important issues, and then the same kinds of data sets that help us understand those issues. So as it turns out, we were looking at a number of the same data sets that became, as I understand it, really important to the Forest Action Plan update. But having said that, as we move into our work in 2021 and focus on the regional conservation strategy, we will be able to more explicitly link to the work that you all have done in building the Forest Action Plan. And as we've talked about with other similar types of plans and studies, we'll be able to lift up and leverage the work that you've done as we look to really understand and draw attention to what Middle Tennessee's regional priorities are in this, when it comes to this set of issues. So I'm glad that we will have that as a work product that we can really focus on and leverage going forward. Then two other quick things. That there was a question in the chat box that Heather, if I can put you on the spot just to bring into the meeting in case people aren't minding the chat box, the question from Jim Redwine, and if you could just summarize that question and your response, that would be helpful. And then I did see that Terry Cook and Sally Palmer from the Nature Conservancy were on. I just wanted to, if they had anything to add, since they co-authored it with you, or anything to reinforce, give them a quick opportunity to chime in before opening it up for any other questions or discussion from the roundtable. So Heather, the question from Jim Redwine.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Ben. So the question was, what do you mean by lower quality hardwoods, and what is the cause of this increase? So as Rachel was mentioning in that forest resource assessment, we've noticed that these lower quality hardwoods, and when we say lower quality, the gradient of hardwoods, by the way, Tennessee is #2 producer of hardwoods in the entire United States. We're still competing with Pennsylvania, though. We're neck and neck. But obviously, we are the #1 producer of whiskey barrels. So I had to make sure I said that. But you have grade 1, 2, and 3, and then kind of pulpwoodish. There's a grade 4, but it kind of gets into semantics. And grade 1 are like veneer trees, super pristine, amazing, straight trees, not a lot of knots, definitely no curve, really good solid trees, no decay. Grade 2, grade 3, you can imagine kind of go down that spectrum. So we're seeing an increase in grade 3, which are pretty undesirable trees. They're not necessarily defined by the species. It's more about their characteristics. So, if there was a tremendous amount of wildfire or misuse, prescribed fire in a certain stand, and it kind of created a lot of rot over time that just hollowed out these trees, or even like a windstorm, or some kind of damage or even trees are just bent over, crooked. They're not really good for a traditional forest product. That's what we call unacceptable growing stock. And the plight that we have as hardwood states, and Tennessee is not not unique to this situation. It's just how hardwood states are, is that, you know, the lifetime of trees often exceed the lifetime of the people who own them. And so, you know, folks kind of make these very short-sighted decisions on needing to cut the best and leave the rest. And that is a true high grading mentality. So they go into the forest stand and they know that, you know, they're never going to see the regeneration or another tree come out in their generation, for example. And so they're just going to cut all the trees that are going to pay their way out of the forest, because, you know, pulpwood obviously does not pay as much as veneer trees. And sometimes loggers just don't want to fool with smaller trees or crooked trees that don't lay on log trucks very well, et cetera. So they'll just take the best trees out of the forest and leave the remaining unacceptable growing stock there. And so we've had decades of folks doing that. And you can't really necessarily fault people for doing that either. You know, they are just really trying to maximize what they think is their economic return out of their forest. And again, we're not unique to that in other hardwood states like Kentucky and Virginia, et cetera. So our strategy is to bolster those industries that can actually use that kind of wood. Pellet mills, for instance, biomass maybe, or just even incentivize forest industry to go in there and just cut that wood down and let it lay, or bust it up for firewood, stuff like that, because those trees are taking up valuable growing space and nutrients that are preventing or can be preventing other trees from growing appropriately. So that's what we mean by low grade hardwoods. It's not necessarily derived from a species composition per se. It's more about the phenotype of the tree. And so Terry or Sally, do you guys want to jump in? You guys are tremendous partners in this effort too, and want to make sure that that the group hears your take on this project as well.
This is Sally speaking. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot to add. You know, we were just grateful to be able to be a good partner in this process, and I just encourage anybody that has detailed questions about the strategy with respect to Nature Conservancy's work, just to reach out to Trish Johnson, who is our project lead on this. She's our Forest Conservation Program Director. If you have any more specific questions on maybe some of the data layers of the science, the resilient connected network, that kind of thing that I could help answer, just feel free to reach out to me. But you know, just grateful for the partnership. Proud to see this plan out, and really happy to see it rolled out to you all in the council forum, and to see it as something that this group is going to have as a resource moving forward with the regional conservation plan. Thanks.
Yeah, this is Terry, and I'll just add on to it. First, just Heather, I just want to let you know how much we appreciate being invited. You know, it was a long journey, but we were really happy to sort of be along for that. And those that are interested in sort of the resilient connected, I think there's a good write-up within the plan that describes it in more detail. If you're interested, like Sally said, those data layers, you know, are available. Interesting enough too that type of analysis that we've done for the entire U.S. So there's now sort of a wall-to-wall map across the U.S. about resilient and connected landscapes. That also includes, you know, biodiversity layers within it as well. So a lot of information sort of on TNC's website, nature.org. But if you want some papers around that or more information, just contact any of us and we can help provide that.
Thanks, Sally and Terry, for jumping in. I appreciate that. And then I'm also seeing a question in the chat from Sean Santaya. Sean, are you able and willing to step in and just ask that question? I think it's a good one that I can recap it also, but if you want to jump in as well, it might be helpful to hear that from you.
Yeah, hey Ben, absolutely. My name
Thanks.
is Sean Sentai. I'm with the Federal Highway Administration, Tennessee Division, out of Nashville here, and we work primarily with the Tennessee DOT and the GNRC as they're doing our transportation planning. From my perspective, it sounds like I really appreciate you guys laying out your priorities for supporting the forestry industry, for supporting healthy forests, and I'm kind of trying to picture how the transportation planning process can best support what your priorities are. So we've got the planning going on in Middle Tennessee, as well as TDOT carrying out their statewide long-range transportation planning, and they're planning to kick off their actual statewide long-range transportation plan update within the next few months, is my understanding. So they're going to be looking at policies for this sort of infrastructure investment across the state, and I'm just wondering if I think you guys would be a great partner to include in that process, and if you guys have had any of those conversations on how transportation infrastructure supports what you guys are trying to carry out there.
Rachel, I'll take a stab at it, and maybe you can support me if I go off the deep end. But yeah, thank you for your question. That's really awesome, and we definitely would like to be part of that conversation as best we can, support best we can. So I guess, in just shooting from the hip, being able to make sure that our forests are valued is really important to us. I mean, it's not, this cliche of, hey, let's go out there and hug some trees, so to speak, but it's more about their value and services that they provide the citizens. And so, just having that awareness of locating or identifying these high value forests, and then locating transportation routes or infrastructure to protect those forests is super important to us. We're as Rachel mentioned, we're not losing forest land, but we might be losing a little bit of the awareness of what forests do for folks, and that's just an outreach and awareness type question there, or topic there. But some of the I think your question was also specific to expanding those industries that you're referring to when we were talking about expanding market diversification. We some of the strategies, though, is expand markets for low quality wood, including the pulp and the biomass and urban waste wood. And urban waste wood is a very important conversation to us for many reasons. And I mean, I can completely nerd out in that topic, but that folks understand that you can have forestry in urban settings. I mean, you can actually manage forests in urban settings. And that's a weird concept for folks, but it's also about, like, in my opinion, forests are the healthiest when they're managed. And you can equate forestry like if you do your garden, right? Like, you pick out some good high quality genetic seeds, you plant them, you have the soil right. When they grow, you start to thin them out so the best producers start to make it to the top. And if you've got a disease or damaged plant, you pull that one out, because it's, you don't know what's going to happen to the neighboring plant. So you do all you can to cultivate the overall health of your garden. Well, forests are nothing different than that. So that sort of concept in urban settings is super important. But back to your point of the transportation, is just valuing the fact that there's forester there and being strategic in how to integrate the human element to where this transportation is taking these humans, and where the population is going to be expanding. We have a huge section in there, Rachel mentioned, of urbanization and forest fragmentation. That's a huge problem for us, because when forests get fragmented, the economies of scales of being able to manage those forests are diminished, and it kind of takes away some opportunities for landowners to be able to do proper management, because forestry kind of has to be done on a larger scale. So I know I rambled a little bit there. I'm not sure if any of that was helpful, but that's kind of my take. And I don't know if Rachel wants to clean up what I just threw down there.
It absolutely is making sense to me. I think like I said, you guys would be an incredibly valuable partner to include with that. I'll certainly reach out to TDOT, and if you guys don't mind, share the contact information. Ben, I really appreciate you making this, bringing this group together for this presentation.
Yeah, Sean, the one other thing I'd add to what Heather relayed is that we talked earlier, this is part of what I was referring to earlier about our earlier interaction with the Division of Forestry staff, but one of the questions we helped that we asked that they helped us understand was where I believe you call them the primary mill sites. Rachel or Heather, tell me if I've got that term wrong, but there's a certain classification of mill sites or of mills, and I believe, I don't have the number in front of me, but there certainly was a lot larger number of those mill sites within the 7-county MPO region than I ever would have guessed. I believe the number was 15 or 17, maybe even a little higher than that. And I think one of the questions that we'd like to better understand and answer going forward, Sean, particularly in future long-range transportation planning cycles, but also in work in between now and then, is understanding the mill owner and operators' understanding of transportation system needs. So that comes full circle back to your question, Sean, and they're just one stakeholder group involved in all of the work that Heather and Rachel are describing in the Forest Action Plan, and only one way in which we can connect the long-range transportation planning process to our forestry sector. But I think that's an important one, and I think we can certainly craft some really useful questions and build some relationships with that segment of business owners so that our future transportation planning work and investments can better understand and meet their needs going forward. So we're looking at about 11:15 right now. I really appreciate the interest and questions. I wouldn't mind giving a few more minutes to a couple of questions. Heather and Rachel, I think you're in overtime right now with respect to the amount of time you're spending on stage and on screen this morning. I appreciate your willingness to field these questions. But then I would love to reserve about 10 minutes. I think we could scale back the amount of time I was initially thinking we might spend on the next agenda item in favor of the questions that I'm still seeing in the chat box related to the Division of Forestry information. So if you guys don't mind fielding a couple more questions. I think I saw that Dory raised her hand, and also Janie had a question in the chat box. If either of you want to jump in, whoever might get there first to ask your question.
This is Dory, and it's not so much, well, my question is, since I've not dug into the Forest Action Plan, is in the area for like urban forest, do y'all have a whole bunch of implementation strategies? Like, are there things that we can start compiling for thinking about a conservation strategy for this region? Because based on the definition you all just said, forest land and canopy cover of just over 10%, a lot of the developed area is probably forest in your definition. Maybe not high quality and all of that, but what all is it that we can cultivate about what we're trying to do? Because I'm actually originally trained as a forester, so there's a lot of interest here. And even if we have a bit of a developed space, people are not doing landscaping well and a whole million other things. But I'm just trying to figure out how do we, just like you heard before, how do we maintain active forest practices, forest markets? But we got so many invasives. And anyway, I didn't know whether you had some that already pulled together in the plan that we could all just cut and paste into another plan that we're all working on.
Yeah, thank you, Dory. That's a really, really good question. So I think we touch on our urban environment in two different objectives. Maintaining and improving connected landscapes is one, and then our strengthening wildfire resilient communities is another. And your comment on those invasives can tie into that as well. But we definitely prioritize increasing and maintaining canopy cover in those areas, and then protecting those riparian areas. And you guys were around when Nashville flooded in 2010, and there was a huge onslaught of folks scrambling to understand how that happened. We kind of, I guess, know how that happened, but we, what we could have done to not, or to prevent it in the future. And it all really does come back to trees, right? Yeah. I mean, it really does. And keeping those waterways with some curves into it and with some tree cover on it. So riparian plantings are really important, but also we have to understand that riparian areas are a conduit to those invasive spreads, right? So not every riparian area is created equal. So we try to keep the action steps, the strategies and objectives and action steps pretty high level. Because I think in our previous action plan, we did have some very specific action steps, and it kind of got folks analysis paralysis, in my opinion. Okay. And so we wanted to leave room for creativity, and we understand that you can take a somewhat vague strategy, and if you and make it your own, and to that end is really important, especially when it comes to grant writing, right? We know how to write grants and make them be very vague. But and then switching to the conversation of wildfire resilient communities, we have to keep 2016 in our thoughts with that strategy and figuring out how we can be very strategic transportation urban planners and be able to have wildfire resilient, urban interface situations. I mean, not having invasive plants that are flashy and just all over the place, or not having vegetation right up to the house, or roads that are able for our dozers and transports to even get up the roadway, underground utilities, that sort of thing. So we kind of give a high level guidance on it, but we don't really get too much into the weeds because we want everybody to be creative and feel the space to be creative. Mm-hmm. And I think that was another question too. We were talking about riparian plantings. That's a big deal, guys. You guys know that. Like keeping vegetation along our waterways is a huge deal.
Yeah, I think that was Dory's counterpart at Harpeth that may have asked that question in the chat. Janie, did you want to jump in?
Yes. Thanks, Ben, and thanks so much. This has been really interesting. I grew up in rural Middle Tennessee, so I've seen logging for years in that area, down around McMinnville, Morgan County, Grundy County. And you kind of got to the kind of thinking about the roadways and road condition of getting in and out of, the forest to move the logs and those things. But some of the things that I and colleagues at Vanderbilt are interested in is kind of this interplay between urban and rural, and how the urban cores are moving towards renewables and smart cities and all of this. And so some of the more rural areas are having to kind of deal with some of the repercussions of that with solar, the focus on renewables. Solar farms are being pushed to rural areas. And so I was curious if you all are seeing kind of a loss of forest land to create space for some of those solar farms.
Interesting.
I'll defer that to Rachel. She's got a better awareness of that than I would.
If you want to talk about Southwide, have we seen transition from forest to solar farms? Absolutely. And it's been on several organizations' radar. I think there are parts of North Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, the Deep South in particular, that have been some of concern for groups. I haven't seen it to the same extent in Tennessee, but that could be because I'm just new to the state. But as far as I know, it hasn't reached as high a level of concern in Tennessee as some other southern states.
Gotcha.
Thanks. I was just curious.
Thanks, Janie.
Thank you.
I'll just say that I think if there was more time, I'd ask you to dive into kind of some reflections on Middle Tennessee more specifically, although we've already gotten at some of that through the organic question and answer and discussion. I think certainly in the course of 2021 and the work we're setting up to develop the regional conservation strategy, we'll have ample opportunity to really pick your brains about how you go from the statewide perspective down to a regional perspective, and more specifically to the 14 county region served by GNRC. That'll be the subject of the work on the strategy front going forward. So I'll hold off on that, but just so you know, we'll really be interested in your perspective on those more regional priorities and interests based on what's on the ground and what's really facing our region here that may or may not be more unique or different than what's happening in other parts of the state or what's happening statewide. If there's one last burning question, I'd give somebody an opportunity to flag one more question.
We say that a lot, Ben, in the fire world. Is there any last burning question?
I'm glad I could tee that up. Maybe that's an appropriate resting place for us.
That's perfect. But yeah,
appropriate landing pad for us right now, maybe.
Yeah, but yeah, thank you. I just want to make sure I'd said thank you, Ben, and for your group for allowing us this opportunity to share our work. You know, it's one of those things when you get a project off of your desk, you're like, you decompress, and then you're like, no, actually, now the real fun starts with making sure folks are aware of you know what you've accomplished. So thank you for that. And by all means, you know, Rachel and I, we absolutely love talking about forestry. So do not ever hesitate to reach out to either one of us. We will probably talk more about it than you would ever want. So we're here for you.
All right. Well, thank you both again for your time and effort preparing for today and engaging in today's discussion. Congratulations on completing the update to the Forest Action Plan. And also, you know, we talked last month about the excitement over the prospect of reconvening in person at the Land Trust for Tennessee's facility, but maybe we're going to have another competitor in the race to see who can host us first in person at one of your facilities. So we'll look forward to making that happen one way or another, hopefully, knock on wood, at some point in 2021. I will, and again, we'll make sure that everyone has access to the slides as a follow-up to this as well. I looking at the clock, it's 11:22. I think we probably could use another 10 minutes. It could go longer depending on the amount of feedback or discussion that unfolds. I've just got a couple of more slides around the regional conservation strategy. Much of the content will look familiar to those who participated in our last several meetings. But as I transition to share my screen again and get my screens all working in concert, I think we could use 10 or 15 minutes. So I will aim to wrap up for sure by 11:40, just to be respectful of everyone's time. We will definitely have more opportunity to discuss the content and issues that I've got to present for you going forward beyond today's meeting. So that's why one of the reasons why I thought it would be certainly easy enough to allow for more time for the discussion with the Division of Forestry staff. So, you know, Heather joked about maybe not being fully upfront with the Nature Conservancy about what she was asking them to get involved in at the beginning of their planning process. And while I'm sure things will change going forward, I want to make sure that we're being as upfront as we possibly can with you all about what we're asking of you when it comes to how we'd like to engage you in the development of the regional conservation strategy. And we are working internally at GNRC to fashion a more detailed work plan for 2021 and look forward to bringing more of those details back to you, most likely at our next meeting. But what we know for certain is that we want to ask of you to play certain roles going forward. And hopefully, as you look at the information on the screen here, it looks familiar because it's ultimately a pretty similar role to what we've asked of you in informing and providing feedback on the work that we carried out at GNRC with you as we engaged in the Regional Transportation Plan update process. So more specifically with respect to the regional conservation strategy, we would really appreciate having your ongoing assistance in characterizing resource conditions and trends across, again, that 14 county region served by GNRC. We want to certainly use your perspective, leverage your perspective and experience to help identify and lift up regional conservation priorities that would be identified in throughout this process and in its eventual work products. We also certainly want to leverage your more sciencey expertise when it comes to identifying appropriate methodologies and metrics for evaluating progress towards the priorities that would be identified. And how that work would likely be carried out is both in our monthly roundtable meetings going forward over the course of 2021, and then in the work group meetings that we started to discuss in our December meeting. And while it's hard to really estimate how many meetings we might be looking at when it comes to all of the work groups that we might convene going forward, we think that it would be helpful to capture some estimate of 2 to 4 meetings between now and mid to late summer of 2021. And we really want those work group meetings to be as targeted and focused as we possibly can. And I'll talk a little bit more in a moment about kind of how we might tee up the questions that would be the focus of those work groups meetings and work over the course of 2021. But ultimately, that's what we're asking of you to do, and not just to participate actively in carrying out those roles in the monthly meetings, but also to consider committing some of your time to participating in those work group meetings over the course of 2021. We also know, and we talked about this a bit in our last meeting, that you all are aware of a whole host of professionals that have technical expertise and experience that we should be leveraging in our work groups. So when we do convene work groups in 2021, we don't expect that membership would be limited to just current roundtable members. We would be happy to reach out and engage additional professionals in those discussions going forward. And we want to take advantage of your ideas and suggestions on that front as well. And then in a slightly different role, we really would like to engage you in helping to identify additional engagement opportunities that we could carry out as part of this process. Heather just talked about how this might be the real fun, where the real fun starts for her in sharing the information that was assembled as part of the Forest Action Plan. The engagement of other stakeholder groups could be seen in much the same way as the fun part of bringing information out to different constituent groups and soliciting their feedback as our work progresses in 2021, and then certainly identifying opportunities to push the resulting work products out into the world to ultimately help have the longer term effect that we are hoping and expecting the regional conservation strategy to have across the Middle Tennessee region. And that kind of work, while we haven't detailed specific prescriptive steps to take in that regard, certainly see an opportunity to scale up or down your level of participation and engagement in that work, really to suit your own personal interests and professional interests and the interests of your organization as well. We would love to have you participate in that work to the greatest extent practical and in a way that reflects your interest going forward. Certainly, if there are questions about any of this or immediate feedback, please jump in. And I'm not seeing major numbers of people peeling off of the meeting right now, so hopefully that suggests that people are open to engaging in these roles as we've described on this slide. We've talked in past meetings about how, as we pivot to the development of the regional conservation strategy, we have the ability to explore and contemplate additional environmental issues that were not as much of a focus in 2020 as we developed our approach to the regional transportation plan evaluation on the environmental front. And this characterization here on this slide is where we're at right now, just in terms of the kinds of issues that we could contemplate as we go forward. I would greatly appreciate any feedback that you all may have right now on the different categories of environmental issues that are on the screen and the different elements that are identified within. I know that each of you, while there are a number of you, if not all of you, that have interest in some professional capacity that spans these different category boundaries, I know that there are a number of you that have particular professional emphases or focuses on these issues. So would love to take advantage of your expertise and perspective to inform our list of issues from the very beginning so that we're headed in the right direction as best as possible as we start out of the gates here in 2021. So with that being said, I guess I would just open it up to see if there are questions or reactions to what's on the screen and whether there are issues that that you think might be missing underneath each one of these 6 different categories. Questions about what's there? This is by no means your one and only opportunity to weigh in on this as well. I think we would envision that before too long, this list of issues would be presented to the work groups that would be convened. And my next slide gets at this as well. But certainly want to take the convening of the roundtable as a whole to just give you all an opportunity to weigh in as a group on where we're starting from.
Hey, this is Daniel McDonald, TDOT Multimodal, and of course that's
Hey, Daniel.
That's our bag is multimodal stuff, and that fits really well under the air quality and climate change. I would definitely suggest kind of a good look at the kind of mode shift in transportation, since that has a big effect on that.
Good suggestion.
Ben, this is Dory, and this might pop up in your next slide, which would be what in each of these 6 categories, whether there's something slightly we want to add to it, is what do we all want to accomplish with them? Are we just putting a plan together with parties of what we want to? I'm interested in, like, how do we get where we want to go? Even if we have a bunch of experts who probably know what our priorities need to be, one of the big challenges then is how do we get there? What are the implementation strategies, and who's been trying things in different places?
Yep. I will get to that in the next slide,
Yeah.
but and if you feel like it's not covered appropriately,
it's cool.
by all means, jump back in. Janie, I see a comment or a question from you in the chat box about the consideration of navigation underwater resources.
Yeah, given that navigation, especially like coming on the Cumberland, is such a energy efficient means to move large volumes of cargo, maybe, flooding and those things can cause disruptions, which then shift it to other modes that are not as energy efficient. So it may not be a good fit, but I just wonder if we want to consider that since we're looking at like emissions and those things as well.
So water-based transport, perhaps, as okay.
Yeah.
Other thoughts or questions at this point? All right, well, I will move on to the next slide. And of course, again, keep in mind that there is always the opportunity to weigh in more on this going forward, both in the work group and in the roundtable setting. So, Dory, this slide gets at some of what you were just talking about and comes out of what we started to discuss last month as well. So if we intend forward with the convening of work groups around those same 6 categories of environmental issues, there was feedback that we fielded in last month's discussion that really focused on trying to ensure some consistent approach from work group to work group to work group, and then also to get at the point that I think you even raised last month as well, that others agreed was important, to really make sure that we get to the part about what we want to do. And so we taking that feedback from last month's discussion, just drafted this set of questions that could be the starting point for each of the work groups' work as we move forward. Again, picking up right from where we are leaving off here in this discussion, have we identified the right issues? Do we need to be looking at other sets of issues? Are there things that are on the list, so to speak, that really don't need as much attention, perhaps? Then going back to what I mentioned earlier about the really leveraging the technical expertise and experiences of this group, what are the current resource conditions around these issues? What are the recent trends? What are the foreseeable trends? Along with what are the foreseeable threats or risk factors? Among everything, not everything can be a priority. So among all of the priorities, what do we really want to make sure the region understands is the region's set of priorities? And it'll be interesting, to be perfectly honest, to see how that decision-making process plays out in engaging as we do around that question, and whether there's consensus arrived at easily and quickly, or whether there needs to be more time and effort put forth to manage different people's perspectives on where the highest priorities may be. And then more specifically and directly to Dory's question, what are the top strategies, tools, or actions that should be pursued? That's really where I think we'd like people's attention to turn very quickly, so that we are building out some common understanding of what we should be investing in as a region going forward in order to meet the priorities and address the resource management needs that we will be characterizing and documenting in some of these earlier steps. And then how should the region measure progress? Getting back to that notion of evaluation and metrics. And, this is a lot of work. I certainly understand that and recognize that we are asking a lot from people to participate in answering these questions. But again, we'll be leveraging the capabilities and capacity of GNRC staff. Certainly, we expect to lean on the research and analytics staff that were so valuable and important to the work that we did with you in 2020 as well. And hope that in laying out these questions, we're demonstrating some intention to build some consistency from work group to work group to work group. And certainly at the same time would appreciate any feedback that you all have as we continue to dial in on the more detailed planning that we want to develop for carrying out this regional conservation planning process.
If you don't mind, this is Dory one more time. Some of the stuff that our organization now has a lot of experience on, even though we've been trained in a whole bunch of other science topics here, is like local zoning and land use. And those are just some of the many, many tools and strategies. So I guess what I'm thinking is, regardless of whether we all sit on each of these things, whatever tools and strategies we might have, we should probably brain dump anyway, because it might be valuable to one of these other categories.
Absolutely.
Where they might pop up multiple times. Because sometimes the tools and strategies cut across a number of these, let's just say, resources. So we might even find that we might, after we do some of this work, want to actually focus maybe and have some focus group shift and focus on some of the top strategies and build them out some more.
That's a great
like
suggestion.
Rearrange ourselves once we've gone through this first phase or something like that.
Absolutely. I think we see the roundtable itself and those monthly meetings as being built-in opportunities to do some of that work, Lori. But certainly, if there's a need and there's value identified in convening, multiple work groups, at the same time to co-convene them, even separate from those monthly roundtable meetings, we can build in that kind of flexibility to how we organize the work. So to wrap things up, as we're right at 11:39, what we are planning to do as an immediate next step is to craft a relatively short survey and request each of you to spend a few minutes completing that. I think that we are likely to be able to get that survey out to you next week, and ideally would have results that we could bring back to the full group by our February meeting date. And that will help us provide a little more definition around who and where we might be able to plug people into this work group work, and where we might need to spend a little more time and effort supplementing participation in those work group structures. And certainly we'll give you another opportunity through that survey to provide feedback on some of the other issues that we brought to you today and have been discussing with you for the last couple of months as well. So look for that as part of the meeting follow-up, likely sometime next week. And if there are any questions or comments or other thoughts in the meantime, by all means, feel free to reach out by phone or by email. And with that, any last questions or comments or any other follow-up that people may have or items that they want to put on the radar of the roundtable? All right. Thanks for hanging in there for a couple of additional minutes this morning. Again, thanks to Heather and Rachel for their time and effort. And everyone stay safe out there, stay well, and we will be in touch as we go forward. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.